Okay, so the last thing that we are going to talk about in our unit on the Gothic period is Germany. Okay, so in Germany, we have the Holy Roman Empire, right, in what is now Germany. It kind of remains stubbornly and conservative Romanesque in the 13th century. So it stays Romanesque longer than other areas of Europe that have already transitioned into the Gothic period. So a little bit of a late bloomer in this particular style, Germany. This is Cologne Cathedral. Gerhard of Cologne is the designer. It's begun in 1248 under the direction of Gerhard of Cologne. It is very Gothic. It has a very different feel in person than French Gothic. So I was here a couple of years ago and it just feels massive. Like those French Gothic buildings are huge, but they have this kind of light, airy sort of quality to them. And this one does not feel light or airy at all. It feels massive. It just feels like a huge, huge thing. It's 150 feet high. The choir is kind of similar in design to Amiens. We have double lancets in the triforium. This thing survives World War II by virtue of its Gothic skeletal design. It was heavily bombed. I mean, lots of heavy artillery fighting in the piazza right in front of it, and on it, it was hit directly a lot, and it survived, which when you see it, if you see it in person, you would believe, because like I said, it just has this kind of massive thing. It's kind of a beast, and it's really quite lovely. Okay, so let's take a peek at it. I mean, you kind of can get the sense. So here are some little people. Here's the front of it. Here it is from the back. You can see, unlike the British, who, as we looked at in our examination of their kind of translation of Gothic, they weren't super into the flying buttresses. Not the case in Germany. Lots and lots and lots and lots of flying buttresses, double flying buttresses all the way around the apse and the back. We have the transept, we have a small crossing tower, and we also have the massive westwork. So we have the really, we still have an emphasis on the two towers in the front and the westwork, which comes out of the Carolingian and then the Etonian traditions of the pre-Romanesque, right? Inside, you can see that we have our double lancets all the way down the triforium. Also, we have these very high, very large windows in the transept and all the way along the nave. We can see all the pointed arches. We have a little bit of mosaic work here as well. We have our six-partite ribbed groin vaults coming up through the springing from the bundled columns all the way down the nave and the transepts. So the interior, while structurally similar to the French Gothic, also feels, something about it just feels heavier inside. There is a lot of beautiful stained glass. We also have these tapestries that are hanging all the way along. We have our very three-dimensional sculpture all the way down the aisle. So that's a little different, having those affixed to the bundled columns all the way down the support system of the aisle. You can see they have the kind of architectural little canopies above them, like what we saw happening in France as well. Okay, that's just a view under the crossing where you can see into the transept. And this is looking up into the spire on one of the Westwork towers. So I climbed all the way up this thing a few years ago. You can walk all the way up the towers and kind of looked up into it, and so I have several pictures of it. One little aside that I think is just kind of neat that maybe isn't super interesting to you in terms of what's happening in the Gothic is one of the big stained glass windows was destroyed in World War II, and then there's a commission to rebuild it. So it's rebuilt in the 20th century, and they decide to commission a really famous modern artist in Germany, Gerhard Richter. If you take Art History 2 with me, we'll talk about Gerhard Richter a lot. He's pretty fantastic. He was a part of a whole bunch of different kinds of artistic movements. He did hyper realistic, like beautiful paintings. He also did super abstract paintings with squeegees. He's still living at the time of this recording. Really fascinating painter, really fascinating career. So he is commissioned to redo these stained glass windows, and I thought I had more notes on this thing somewhere. Here it is, I think. Okay, so it's 106 square meters. There are 72 colors of glass. So on August 25th, 2007, oh, I apologize, I said the 20th century, the 21st century, the window is inaugurated as part of a Eucharist celebration. And so the colors chosen, Gerhard Richter wanted to use colors that would have been available to the original Gothic glaziers, the original Gothic glass artist who made the original window. So there's a palette of 800, and he chooses these 72 colors specifically. They are, again, colors that would have been used in the original window. He decides to do a really contemporary version of a window where he creates this kind of pixelated image. It's not really an image, it's totally abstract and pixelated. So it's really just paying homage to the color of the glass itself and to the glass and really what the glass does with the light inside the church. So he does a lot of research before designing this and decides that the thing to honor and to pay attention to here is the actual glass and the way it works with light. So you can see how the light filters through. I think it's beautiful. It's a really interesting contrast when you're there seeing this window and then with the more traditional windows throughout the rest of the building. Some people loved it, some people really don't love it. Some people really hate it, but I think it's pretty cool. Okay, so I wanted to just give you a little aside, a contemporary art lesson related to this. This is St. Elizabeth in Marburg, Germany. So this is another example of German Gothic. This is a Hellenkirche, which means it's a hall church. Okay, so a hall church is something that we learned about in the Romanesque. It's where the clerestory, the windows on the aisle are the same height as the nave, so the aisles and the nave are the same height, so more light can come in, generally speaking. And this is kind of a German variant on Gothic cathedral designs, and it's a hall church. This style is very popular in Germany. There's no tribune, there's no triforium or clerestory, it's just the same height of aisles as the nave on these. So here's the interior and what that looks like. Less stained glass, more just glass, leaded, heavily leaded glass to let glass in, excuse me, to let light in to the space. We still have the same kind of ribbed vault, but you can see it really changes the inside. It kind of opens it up, it makes it feel a little lighter, and it also just almost like declutters it a little bit. You just don't have as much going on in terms of the interior. There is still stained glass, particularly in the apse and in the chapels around the apse in this building. This is another example of a hall church from this time period. This is designed by Peter Parler, and it's Heilige Church of the Holy Cross. And you can see here, they don't even try to disguise like this kind of hall church design. They don't have anything really of a westwork. We just have this sort of A-frame top that looks more like a timber roof church from before the Romanesque. And then you can see the stained glass all the way around the side. We have engaged buttresses like a Romanesque building, but everything's very pointy. We have pointy arches, we have rose windows, so we still have some Gothic elements. On the interior, you can see that this gets a little bit more similar to what's happening in England. So if you looked at the lecture on England and the perpendicular style, in the perpendicular style, we see all this fan vaulting being developed. So this kind of happens in Germany. It doesn't get to the extent of the perpendicular style in England, but we have more elaborate rib vaulting. So we have some more kind of sculptural looking, kind of decorative rib vaulting happening. And this is coming off columns. They're not bundled columns like we've seen before. We do have large stained glass windows here, but again, the interior, just in terms of the aisle going out into, or the nave going out into the aisles, is a little bit more simplified. Okay, let's look at sculpture quickly in Germany. So we're just going to look at this one example. Naturalism in sculpture is a thing that we kind of see throughout the Gothic. Like, we're pushing more and more toward naturalism, kind of a look back at classical ideas about sculpture. Not the case in Germany. So this is the Russian Pieta, which means the piety, the compassion. And in contrast to what we've seen happening in other parts of Europe with sculpture, we see this kind of, it's humanizing still, right? Like, if we think of our, the statue of the Virgin outside of Notre Dame, the Virgin of Paris, who has this very soft, very tender kind of face. So that emotionalism is taken to an extreme in German sculpture. So we have this very kind of upset, emotional face on the Mary. We have a Christ who looks like he's very suffering. And it gets kind of gory, kind of graphic. Like, the wounds from the stigmata are really emphasized here. The proportions are all over the place. Christ looks quite emaciated and thin and small in the lap of his mother. And he's an adult man, so he would be, bigger than her, generally speaking. So it kind of leans into this this kind of very emotional thing. It's kind of nightmarish. It's kind of a gory, scary sort of sculpture in my mind. It is humanizing. We have an emphasis on emotion. We have this stunted, distorted, sort of wrecked figure of the Christ. And the whole thing just seems to be saying, what is your suffering compared to this? This is me holding my tortured dead child, So we have this extreme emotion, and where the form of the body is supposed to reflect that interior kind of emotional pain, okay? So a very different direction in sculpture in Germany at this time. Okay, so that is it for the Gothic and for this class. I hope you'll take Art History 2 and continue your studies with me. If you are my students, if you are random internet people, you can, do whatever you want. All right.